Hi, this is Selah with Farm to Market Miniatures, and I want to thank you for joining my miniature hydrangeas tutorial. This is part 3, where we will take all the flower components we created in part 2 and begin putting them all together to make our miniature hydrangeas. If you missed part 1 and 2, you will want to go back to watch them before moving on to part 3. The links to all these are listed below this video, or you could visit my blog at farmtomarketminiatures.com to see and read the complete tutorial. We're going to start part 3 with a really simple process of painting our flower head centers. These little centers should be dry by now. Usually they take overnight to dry or a couple of hours out in the hot sun, so hopefully your little centers are dry. I've chosen to paint mine light lavender because I will be making a light lavender flower for this session. It looks like this. So the center of this flower looks like this, and that's what we're going to do with the rest of these. It's really easy. I've already have my puddle of paint here on my wax paper, and I have my water, my paper towel, and my paintbrush. So I'm going to just dip my paintbrush in and easily glide it over that little ball. It doesn't have to be perfect because you're going to be putting little petals on there. The process is actually a little extra step. Some people may elect not to do it, but I like to do it because sometimes the little flower petals don't show, or actually don't cover, the entire little ball. So you want something inside that looks similar to the color of the petals. So that's why I take this little few extra seconds to just cover those up, and they dry pretty quickly. So we're going to set that aside and go on to our next process. For shaping petals, we're going to need your 2mm stylus, your little foam pad, and your petals that you have chosen to make your flower with. I chose the lavender because I'm going to be making the lavender flower. So you take your petals and you spread them out over your foam pad, and you take your number 2 or your 2mm stylus, and you want to go to the little petals. There's 4 of them on this stamped flower, and you want to go to each little petal and make a little circle within that petal. And what that does is it shapes that petal as you push it down into the foam and creates a little curve. Once you do all 4 of the petals, then you want to go to the center and do the same thing, just like you're tickling its tummy. And it makes a sweet little flower ball, just like that. So let me go here and let's try it again. And you go to each petal, doesn't matter which way you go or anything, you just want to go to each little petal, and then you want to go to the center. And you move that one out of the way and you go to the next one. And you continue doing this until you get all your petals done on all your punches. I will say, if you made your centers around the size that we talked about, then it will take anywhere from 12 to 15 of these little flowers to cover the ball that we created with the clay. About 12 to 15 of them, depending on the size of the ball that you ended up with. So I'm going to keep on punching these, and I'll probably speed the time up a little bit and allow you to do the same, and I will meet you on the other side. As you see, we have all these little flowers have been made into little cups. And I did want to stop and show you a couple of things. Some of my papers were actually double. I don't know if you can see this or not. Perhaps it'd be better down here. I take my tweezers. What happened here was when I punched my paper, there must have been two pieces of paper actually that I was punching instead of just one. So the little punched flower came out as two little pieces stuck together. I saw there were a couple of those. So all you have to do if that happens to you is just to pull them apart, or you could leave them together. The only thing is it may pop out at another time, and so you may not want to leave those together. So I just wanted to be sure to show you that that can happen, and I'm just going to re-curl these, and they'll be just fine to work into my flowers. Okay, I should have plenty for a couple of flowers, and I hope that was fun for you. I love doing this. It actually is very calming and fun. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is work with our leaves. Okay, I pulled my leaves out, and there's a little thing to discuss here. When I punched my leaves, I used a paper that actually had a pattern on it, and it was a cardstock, and I told you that I split that cardstock in half, and then I painted the back of the cardstock because it was a little bit brownish, and I kind of wanted it to match a little bit with my front. So here's a front and here's a back. And so what I wanted to do, and what you'll want to do, is decide which side do you want facing your flower and which side do you want on the outside. Well, normally I would have put this patterned side up on the top, but because of the way I was going to use am going to use my flowers, you're only going to see the bottom of the leaf. So I chose to make my leaves where the patterns were facing the bottom. So you need to decide which side if you're going to be using your flower standing straight up and down, you will most likely see this part of your leaf more. Or if it's going to be a hanging hydrangea, hanging down on something, then this part would be what shows the most. So I just wanted to point that out, and so you can decide which way you want to do it. So since I am going to have it to where the bottom is showing, I am actually going to put my little leaves out where the unpatterned side is showing, and that's where I will place the little rib or the little vein that goes into the leaf. So let me show you how I do that. I start at either end, and the leaf is kind of curved a little bit, so I make my vein a little bit curved, and I start at one end and I just press down and I make a curve until I get down to the little stem. And that's all I do. And I come, and I'm also using the 2mm again. It doesn't have to be in the center. Some leaves actually do have a little bit offside. And you just want to continue that on each one of your leaves. Just making that little vein. And if you need to use your fingers to hold it, you can do that. If you hear thunder in the background, we're just about to have a little bit of very needed rain here in Texas. Okay, so I think I've done that on each one. So at this point, what I also like to do, I take the number 3, which is a little bit larger than the number 2, and I come in and I go to the side a little bit and curl that in. So I just come next to where that vein was that we just put in there and just kind of make a little bit of a divot into the leaf, and it shapes it, the leaf curls it a little bit. You don't need to curl it up as much as we did the petals, but just having a little bit of shape is really nice, comes out really nice. You don't want another line, you kind of just want a little section where it's rounded. This leaf I didn't put a vein in, so we'll need to do that. Okay. All right, let me put that vein in and then we'll be done with the leaves. I made plenty of leaves. You will probably use anywhere from 2 to 5 leaves or 3 to 5 leaves on your flowers, depending on what you're going to be using them for. Sometimes if you're putting them in a arrangement, you don't want to put too many leaves on each flower because it just takes up too much room in your arrangement. So maybe on 1 or 2 of them you'll have 4 or 5 leaves, and maybe a couple of others you'll have 2 leaves. It just all depends on how they look when you put them all together. You don't want your leaves to overtake your arrangement and actually be the center of attention. Those little flowers are the center of attention. Okay, so that's how we do the leaves, and next we're going to be creating the flower heads with the petals. I have the little flower heads that we just worked on. They're all ready to be glued onto our clay balls that we made in part 2, and now they've been colored with the paint that matches your petals. And you want your Aleene's quick dry tacky glue. And what I like to use is something that's strong, like a plate, or this is just a little wood block that I put my glue on. And I put about a pea-sized amount of glue on there because it does dry pretty quickly, and so you don't want to put a big glob on there and just have it dry up on you. I love this part. So what you want to do is whichever hand you use, whether you use your right hand for picking up things, put your flower your flower stem in your left hand, and then you want to pick up one of your little cups, your little flower cup that you made, and I pick it up very delicately by one of the little petals, and you want glue on the back side on that little flat part. So you just tip it into your glue just slightly, and I like to just go ahead and start right up at the top. Hopefully you can see that. I just glued that right there on top, and then you go and pick up another little petal, and you can glue it right next to it. And you just continue this action until you fill that whole little flower up with petals. Try to get them as close to each other as you possibly can. They kind of slip around for a few minutes while they're drying, but it doesn't take too long, and they're done. They're drying. Okay. And like I said, it takes anywhere from 10 to 15 petals, just depending on how big or small you created your flower head center. We are almost done with this one. Just keep turning it around. I find this very, very calming. I just love doing this. Hopefully you will too. Okay, I think that'll do it. If you want, you could probably squeeze one more right down in that center. I'm going to try to do that. Just see if I can press that down in there. There you go, it went, it worked. All right, so there's our very first flower head, all ready to go. And lay that off to the side, and it will dry really relatively quickly because of this quick dry glue. I'm going to start on another one while I have a little bit of glue left here. And use up what I have, and then I'll have to get me some more glue. I wish y'all could see outside right now. It's thundering, the wind is blowing, and the sun is shining brightly. That's the fun part of Texas weather. You never know. All right, a couple of more and we'll be done with this one. See how quick this goes? I just love it. That's why I have said in the other segments that you want to go ahead and make several things at once, and that way when you're ready to make your flowers, you have everything ready and you have more than enough ready, and that way you can just work until you don't want to anymore, and you don't have to stop and keep making some of the components. You have plenty of components to work with, and so it's worth the extra little effort to create those components. Now I want to show you something here. I noticed that because of the way these petals are, and I could probably manipulate them a little differently, but I can see right down in there, I can see a little bit of the purple flower center. So if I had not painted that flower center purple or light lavender, you would see white because it began as white, and it just would not look quite as finished. With that little bit deeper purple, it actually kind of gives it a little bit of dimension, and there's probably other areas on this flower where it also you could see that little bit of deeper purple, and that actually just adds a little bit of dimension. And I'm going to take this moment also, I didn't mention it in the last segment where we were creating and forming our little petals. If you have some of your petals that actually had a little place on the side of it that was, I don't have one right in front of me, but let me get one of the little flower petals. Maybe when you punched it, part of the petal did not punch right. Don't throw that piece away. You can still use that little piece, because when you put it all together here, it's not going to be noticeable. And again, I've said it before, the beauty of nature is the imperfection. If you look at a mountain and you see all the rocks and the trees and all that, as a whole, it looks perfect. But if you get up close, you're going to see the crags, you're going to see the rock slides, and you'll see the burnt out leaves off the trees that have been burnt or dead. You don't see that when you look at the whole. So don't discount some of those elements that may be a little bit off. They actually add character to your piece. So I encourage you to use all the pieces that you have. Okay, so I'm going to let you continue on creating your little flower petals as you go, and I'm going to get ready for the next part. After your petals have dried on your flower heads, it's time to add the leaves. What you'll need in this segment are the leaves that you shaped, the quick dry tacky glue, a surface for your glue, your flower heads on your green stems, and your floral tape. The first thing that you want to do is to take your green tape and cut about a 3 to 4 inch piece off of it. I used about a 3.5 inch on this flower. I always add a little bit of glue to the base of my stem first, and then I tape my tape to the base of the stem and allow it to dry. So that's what this one is laying there. It's been allowed to dry. And the reason why I do that is because when you are beginning to wrap your floral tape down this thin wire, it has a tendency to start slipping down the wire. So I avoid that by just adding a little bit of glue on the very tip of this area of the stem, and I just curl one time around and then allow it to dry. After it's dry, this is when we'll begin to actually start wrapping the tape down the stem. With floral tape, as you see, it doesn't have any sticky to it. But the way that it works is as you are wrapping in a diagonal fashion down the stem, you want to pull slightly. You just want a little bit of a pull. And what that pull and wrapped upon itself will actually cause this tape to stick onto itself. So that is the way that floral tape actually sticks. So I've put this glue on here. It's now dry, and I'm going to begin to wrap down to where I want to begin adding my leaf. So I don't want it right up next to the flower. I'm going to come down at a diagonal fashion, and I will add my leaf about 1/8 of an inch down past my bottom of my flower. This is where you need to decide whether you want to have the underside or the top side of your leaf to show. I told you earlier in our tutorial, I want the underside to be towards my flower and the top side to be actually towards what would seem the bottom. And that's because I'll be hanging my hydrangeas upside down. So you see on these leaves, they have a little bit of a stem, and that will be the area that you want to put a little glue on, and that will go underneath your tape. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. I've come down just a little bit on my stem, and I want to put a leaf right here, about 1/16 to 1/8 inch underneath my flower. I'm going to take my leaf and my little stem and dip it into my glue. And I need to put a little bit of fresh glue, but there's the glue on my leaf, and I'm going to just pinch that underneath the tape and give it just a second, and then you can start winding down. And I want to add another flower. So the tape actually went over that little stem and glue. Okay, and adding just a little bit of glue to that. I need to get some fresh glue. All right, you want to make sure that glue is fresh so that it will actually stick on there. Okay, so I've added my second leaf, and I've put that tape right over the stem. Hopefully you can see that. Sorry, this seems a little awkward. I'm trying to hold it out away from me and film this so that you can see what I'm doing. All right, now the whole time that I am wrapping, I'm pulling just slightly so that that tape will stick to itself. Okay, so I want to put 1 or 2 more leaves on this one so you can continue to see what I'm doing. And in the meantime, I need a little bit more glue. There we go. Okay, So because I'm putting what would be the underside towards my flower, I have it towards my flower, underneath the tape. And I just pinch it there so that it will stick underneath that tape. And then I'm going to wrap a little bit more coming down my stem. I did about a half of a wrap, and I need to have a leaf on this side, so I'm going to add another leaf to this side. And as you can see, this leaf is a little further down than these beginning leaves that we put on there, and that's because you're wrapping this tape as you go down the stem. Now we're going to be able to shape these leaves in a few minutes once we allow it to dry a little bit. For right now, I'm just going to let everybody just stay flat. And I'm going to add one more leaf right here. So that will make 1, 2, 3, 4. This will be 5 leaves on this particular flower. As I told you earlier, you can have as many leaves as you want, as few or as many. I like to do them in odd numbers, 3, 5, 7. I rarely ever put 7 leaves on, but I like to do an odd number. Okay, so now that I've got all my leaves on, I want to finish wrapping the rest of my stem. Remember how I told you that it's okay if some of the white is showing when you paint your stem? That's perfectly fine. Now I am pulling that tape just slightly as I turn and wrap the rest of the stem at a diagonal going down the stem. Hopefully I'm not out of the camera view. And my stem is pretty long, so I'll be cutting a lot of this off. Okay, so I'm just turning it and pulling as I go. All right, I have wrapped that stem. And there are there are the leaves. I'm going to allow this, whoops, that leaf slipped out, so I'm going to just put it off to the side. I'm going to allow this to dry, and then we will shape those leaves a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to attempt to try to show you that again. I know it's a little hard to see, but I want to make sure that you get this. Cut my tape. Okay, so I add a little bit of glue right here at the beginning, and I just twist that around once and allow that to dry just a few seconds. It doesn't take long to dry. Whoops. And I just pulled it right off. All right. Okay, so for our first leaf, I'm going to start going down the stem a little bit because I want my leaf to start about 1/8 of an inch down. Sticking just the little stem of the leaf in the glue and adding that underneath the tape and pinching, and then I'm going to make a little turn here with the tape. And I just pulled it out. So you just go back, it's tedious. Okay, it is under there. And now we want to add another one to this side. I've pinched it, try to get it to stick in there. If you have a little glue showing, it's okay, it'll dry clear. All right, I'm making another diagonal turn, pulling that tape just a little bit upon itself so it will stick to itself. And I'm going to add another another leaf right here. on this side. Laying that tape over the stem of the leaf with the glue on it. Pinching down to secure that glue. Being careful not to rip all the leaves out like I've been doing. I'm just going to put 3 on that one, and so the rest of the time you want to pull and twist your stem, pinching it as you go down the rest of the stem. I lost that leaf. I see where it goes, so I'm going to show you how I'm going to stick that back in there. And I'm pulling on that tape so it'll stick to itself all the way down. Okay. All right, so I saw where that little leaf came out and there's still a little opening where I can probably stick that with a little bit of glue right back into this opening and allow it to just reset right there. Okay, so I'm going to be real delicate with that and allow it to dry off to the side. All right, so hopefully you were able to see what I was doing. I'll come back in a few minutes and I'll show you what we need to do with the rest of our leaves. Once your leaves are nice and dry after we've wrapped them, then you can come back in and actually pull them down a little bit and shape where you would like them to actually rest. And so make sure that they are nice and dry before you do this, or it will just pull right out from underneath your tape that you had wrapped on here. Even though you had a little glue on there, sometimes the glue doesn't actually allow that to, if the glue isn't dry, it does not allow those leaves to stay. So make sure that glue is dry. And you can kind of pull those leaves and shape them to wherever you want. You can also bend the leaf a little bit. You know, sometimes a leaf is bent over a little bit. However you need to do it. But the important thing is not to mess with them until this is completely dry. Okay, so now what I want to show you is what I like to do sometimes with a flower that just has all one color in the petals. I like to take either the same color, a little bit darker, or I'll take even a contrasting color and add it to the top tips of the petals. And I'll show you next how to do that. The last little step that I'd like to share with you is just something a little extra, a little special, and it's actually very optional. So what I've done here is I've taken this light lavender and I've actually taken and put a little bit on my brush and gone in and touched the very edges, the very tips of this flower as I turn it around. When this dries, it'll dry a little bit darker than actually this color here, and it will give this flower just a touch of dimension. And I'll do the same with the blue after I clean my brush. And this is the light blue that I had recommended in our materials, and touching just the edges, just the tips, and you don't have to cover each one, just most of them, and you can pull your leaf down and get down in there if you'd like. And that will be it on that. And that will also dry a little bit darker, and it'll just give a little touch of dimension. If you've seen hydrangeas, hydrangeas sometimes can be multicolors. Sometimes it's all one color, but different shades of the same color. And then sometimes there's the purple ones that have a little bit of blue on the edges. So I hope that you've enjoyed this tutorial and that you have lots of fun making more flowers. I would love to see what you have made. If you can post your pictures in the comments or even post a link there so that I can see, I would love to see that. Thanks for joining me, and until the next tutorial, we will see you later. Bye.